Transferring wealth successfully starts with asking yourself questions that will give your family a better life now and for generations to come. In this podcast, financial experts John and Michael Parise from Copper Beech Financial Group guide you through eye-opening questions to help you discover the truth about your wealth. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to The Truth About Wealth with John and Michael Parise of Copper Beech Financial Group. Well, hello, fellas. How are you?
Hey, Wendy.
Hey, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to see you guys. You know, I missed you for a while, and now you're like bombarding me. You're here, and now you're here again.
We go that way.
We were
We're a little tied up.
been off the podcasting train for a little while.
Been very busy.
Getting back on track.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. So what are we going to be focusing on today?
Today's going to be, I think, an interesting topic. One that as we were talking a little earlier about what we were going to talk about, is something that's come up. It's always come up, but a little bit more
Pretty consistently.
Recently, and that is estate equalization. It's an estate equalization conversation, but we're going to frame this around the family business. And we've come across a lot of families, again, recently that these topics I think we're going to talk about today have come up. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're really going to focus a lot on founder generation. So usually Gen 1 passing to Gen 2, that's usually where we see some of these issues, right? Yes, exactly. So, and I'm sure we'll probably get into a little bit of our plan as well. But that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're excited.
All right.
Yeah, actually, it's a case study. We're working on the case now, so it's very, very fresh and all new data. And again, it's very consistent. We see this with families, but it's just, I think it's a great case study already. So we're excited about presenting it to you today.
Yeah, so I think that to start, I think that looking at how almost every family, not always, but most families structure their estate plan, again, usually from that Gen 1 business owner to Gen 2, they want to keep everything equal. So they want to, let's say they have 3 children, maybe we'll use us as an example, Dad, but you have 3 children, They want to be able to treat all of their children equally, all right? So they want to divide up their estate equally, let's say a third, a third, a third. And the challenge comes in when you have a family business, typically, or really any closely held business, and how that ownership gets divided up amongst those children. The reason is because more often than not always, but more often than not, only one or less than the full amount of those children is working in the business. And so that kind of creates this additional complexity and layer of complexity with an estate plan, because they want to treat, again, all their children equally. But do they transfer ownership of the business to all 3 of their children when only 1 or let's say 2 of those children are working in the business? It can create a little bit of friction from time to time, depending on how it's structured. So for those listeners that are maybe starting this process, maybe they're thinking about this transition of a family business to the next generation, maybe this will help illuminate maybe some considerations or things that you should talk to your family about as you're going through that process.
Yeah, I'll talk about our family, the girls. Mm-hmm. I offered the girls to join the Copper Beech family. Michael's been working with me 15 years, building it very successfully so. And I said to the girls one afternoon, listen, when Dad's no longer here, your brother's going to need some help to run the family business, because he's our succession, Mom and Dad's succession of this valuable asset. And they said, Dad, I don't do math. I go, girls, it's not math. But that's how they looked at it. So I sat and I said, listen, I don't want you to come back to me or Michael or Mom, say you never gave me the opportunity to join the business. You always have a seat at the table. It's your choice whether or not you want to implement a next step to work with Michael. They said, Dad, listen, we don't want anything to do with it. I want to write and do my thing. And my other daughter was running our Pilates studios. So they both agreed that they weren't going to be involved. And Michael's going to have complete ownership of the firm upon me passing. And they all know that. But I've equalized, and that's what we're going to get to today, my other assets because I had the same plan, a third, a third, a third. I didn't want to give Michael, 2/3 of the most valuable asset we have, and the girls get something less. So I took other assets that I own, real estate and investment accounts, whatever, and carved them off for the girls. And as it turns out, the girls actually own a piece of the business. It's a long story how I did it, but they actually own a piece of my share. Ultimately, it's still not equal to Michael's share, but they get a little bit of piece of it. But I did equalize using other assets. I think that's where you want to go with part of the discussion.
And that, I think, just illustrates how custom all of these plans can be, because that fit for our plan and our family. It might not fit for every family. And oftentimes when we get in these conversations with families, very often some of this planning has already been done, and it's a little difficult to unwind that now. So as an example, we are recently working with another family that there's 4 children involved, 2 of whom are in the business and 2 that are not working in the business. Yet all 4 of them own essentially or slated to own 25% each of that company after dad passes away. That's creating already, before dad's still alive, right? So there is some changes that he can make or adjustments that he can make in his plan, but that's already creating a little bit of friction between the children and dad, because the 2 sons that are working in the business want to know about his succession plan because they want to take over the business and they want 100% of the growth, because they're saying to themselves, I'm working in the business. My sisters, 2 daughters that are not working in the business, they're not, yet they own the same amount of ownership. So these are the things that come into play. And again, there's no right answer, but hopefully we'll get into a little bit of the considerations that families, again, can be thinking about as they're going through this process.
Yeah, and we went through the audit. We're going through the audit now, and if you remember in our previous podcast, our audit is a process we use that we first determine through an analysis of reading all their financials, looking at their tax returns, looking at all their state documents, and doing a review, again, an audit, to get back to the family and say, listen, this is the things we observed and things you might want to consider maybe looking into. And one of the ones was Michael just brought up. So here's how the question I asked. I said, okay, when dad passes away and each one of the family members, the kids, get 25% ownership of the business, and it's all owned in trusts, which was not a bad decision, but there's one trustee that manages all these 4 trusts. How does that work? How does that get equalized? How does that conversation go? And the other advisors looked at it and said, good point. Because we know one thing about families, when the core family goes, mom and dad, and the kids are all by themselves trying to figure this stuff out, it could be a nightmare and cause generational strife that's not necessarily good. So already we're discovering that they've went so far with developing, hey, I want equalization amongst all the 4 kids, but this asset's probably 80% of their net worth.
Yep.
And you're toying with a war zone. So we're going to try to approach it where we're going to equalize it through other methods or find some kind of a strategy to possibly buy the girls out. There's a lot of different scenarios. And right now we're in the process of building that sleeve of recommendations they might want to consider. But already the other advisors saying, we never thought about that. Nope. We didn't look into we need to look at that. So we're getting nods by the other advisors saying we should have asked that question before. But I think that's what makes us a little different as practitioners. We ask the deep questions that we know cause problems unless you have clarity on those answers. And that's really what this boils down to.
Yeah, I think that, and you brought up in this particular case, the daughters, and this is a really interesting question for families to think about that want to treat all of their children equally is, do the family member children, in this case, that are not going to be involved in the business, do they want to have ownership of the company? That's a really important question, because being an owner of a business, whether it's in trust or they own it themselves, that imparts a certain amount of responsibility in terms of managing, even if they're not managing the business, but being an owner of a business still has a certain amount of responsibility attached to it. So having these conversations ahead of time is really important. And in this particular family's case, a lot of this, again, planning was already done by the time we met the family. So some of it might be difficult to unwind. You can't really go back in time and just change that, but there may be a way to either have the sons buy out the daughters, but all this needs to be coordinated and communicated amongst all the generations and all the families to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, that's why we always see this, Wendy. We said earlier, we see this a lot where we get brought into a situation that's already been designed and we have to kind of undo it certain ways. And sometimes, to Michael's point, it's hard to do that. So we try to fix it before it gets broken with new relationships that haven't gotten that far, but are thinking about dealing with their children regarding their largest asset, which is their company business. And in a lot of cases, the children aren't in the business. You still have the same issue. That value has to go someplace, and it's got to be equalized. How do you do that with an ongoing business? Do they sell it upon dad's passing, or they keep it running with a board of directors, or one of the kids step in and run it? I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios, but if you don't ask those questions up front, it could cause a problem. We see it pretty routinely, unfortunately, sometimes not to the good.
Yeah. I think that too, question that often come up is if, let's say, as an example, everybody in both generations in this case is on the same page about having ownership of the business transfer to the next generation, does everybody work in the business? Is that a requirement in terms of getting ownership? So there's a certain amount of thought process that goes on there, or we recommend should go on there to make sure that that is all situated properly, because one of the other struggles that can come up when these conversations haven't been done ahead of time is you might have everybody in the next generation owning a share of the business, but this family is a prime example we're talking about, where in this case the daughters do not work in the business. Does that create issues of unfairness that the sons that are working in the business have? Right now, they're drawing a salary from the company. They're working in the business, so they're getting some additional, let's say, benefits from being in the business. But is that fair that they just get that salary in the same ownership stake? Or how is that salary shared between the two brothers that are actually working in the business? So there's a lot of dynamics that come into play here. And hopefully what we get to here is to make sure that everybody is on the same page with having those conversations at a time.
What I'm curious about is when you're talking about equalizing things, like, Michael, you're in the business and, but do you have like a solid number that you have for, say, the business as opposed to real estate you might have, and then like any kind of appreciation or potential growth?
That all those variables can be factored in, and we have done that. And that's a great question too, because business owners may say, well, I'd rather have the business because a business, I believe this business can grow at a faster rate than, let's say, real estate or marketable securities in the stock market. That they might be able to grow faster, so I'd rather have that. But that business has to be managed. Somebody has to run that business versus a passive real estate portfolio, perhaps, or a passive stock portfolio. You might not have to manage it. So which is the better option? It's all depending on what the family wants and what the individual members of the family want.
Yeah, why you want to look at that up front. And I tell families that we start to work with or starting a new business, you have to have the end game in mind. What's the exit? What's the strategy for the family? Is it something you want to develop over the next, to the next generation if it's successful? What's your end game in mind? You kind of start backwards a little bit. I know it's a strange question to ask, but it gets you to think about, okay, that end strategy has a couple features to it. One, if I build this company and it's worth X amount of dollars and I die suddenly, what happens to the value of the business? Is it lessened because the key player is gone? So how do you prepare for that? Is there a strategy that says, how do I protect the value that dad or mom or both built this company for the benefit of the children? If someone doesn't prepare for those exits, and that's a death scenario, it's a disability scenario, it's a retirement scenario, and it's not just with family members, also with partners in businesses. We see a lot of conflict not covering those issues, causing uncertainty down the road of what happens to the value that for my family, if I'm a partner with a third party, what would value, how do I protect that for my children versus a family business is a little closer, but you still have those same issues. How do I protect that value? So you got to think ahead. I don't know if you want to add something.
I think that's great, because this is another issue that can come up and has come up in conversations with families is, let's say, again, using this family this hasn't come up with this family, by the way, but let's say the daughter says in that example, okay, well, maybe dad's still running the business. He's involved in the business. He's really the intellectual capital of this company. Something happens to dad. Okay, I understand my brothers want to take over the business, and I'm going to get ownership of that business, but how risky of a proposition is that for me, right? If they're not going to be able to manage and run the business the way that dad did, is that a risk for me? And would I rather be bought out and not have to deal with that issue? So that comes up from time to time too. Now they would, of course, if the business is super successful and the kids do a phenomenal job, they would miss out on that growth. But that's a good point, that the succession of the management and the value protection of this business is really important. Yeah, it just adds additional complexity, and that has to be managed. The other thing that I often find, and we get your thoughts, Dad, on this too, is we've seen this. If there is shared equal ownership amongst the next generation, get back to the salary conversation. And a lot of times equality, actually the family that I'm thinking of, it wasn't passed down from the first generation. They formed the business themselves, but this was something that ownership, was shared equally, but the salaries were also shared equally, yet everybody has a different role or takes a different role within the business in terms of what they do. And that can create some friction as well. So consider that dynamic. Again, in the goal of being equal and having everybody have an equal stake in the business, try to bifurcate a little bit the salaries that you're taking working in the company versus your shareholder distributions or your ownership distributions from the business itself. Those might be equal, but the salaries, it may actually make sense to make them not equal and more commensurate with the role that each person is doing, right? If you have a president of the company, CEO of the company, they should be paid a particular salary that's commensurate with that responsibility versus somebody that is maybe in, a different role. Let's say there may be an HR director. That might be a different salary within the business. So everybody's working, but it might just be in a different level. And that is good or bad. There's no right answers, but I know we've come across that issue where certain members of the family say, hey, this is just, I'm the president. I'm busting my butt trying to get and grow the company and get it to be successful. And I'm working 12 hours a day, but my sibling over here doesn't have that responsibility and we're sharing everything equally. This is not fair. And you can not only have family conflict there potentially, you also get feelings of demotivation potentially with that president that's going through that. And so just things to keep in mind. Again, if this works for your family, great, but it often doesn't.
See, this is all from the heart. I mean, family business is I call it, when you have 4 kids, it's your 5th child. You spend 90% of your time running and working with your 5th child. It's hard to let go. It's hard to talk about that child because a lot of people aren't clear about what that child's all about because it's too much to share with them on a big scope. So you have a tendency not to look at all those details that Michael just talked about, like salaries. But the reality is you have to think through the issues because it's a hard issue. I want to be fair to all my kids, but how do I address that to my kids? Mom and dad, it's very hard for mom and dad to have that conversation. They don't know how to start it. So that's where we kind of sometimes act as that buffer. Make us the bad guys. Let us do that for you. Let us have that conversation. Let us bring them into meetings and talk about the stress points on what's going to happen when mom and dad pass away. And invariably we get comments, thank God you guys are working with mom and dad, because we sit and worry and wonder what they're going to be doing. So we get that feedback. They're just as concerned as we are, but then how do you approach mom and dad on that? So sometimes the communication we've talked about in the past is a very key factor. So we help bridge that G1 to G2 and sometimes a G3 from our conversations. We think that's a very important part of our step. There's another case study we're working. We just finished some planning. We have a very, very good family we work with on the West Coast that have 3 siblings. Dad, granddad started the business, right? Mm-hmm. And dad gave the business to the 3 siblings, 2 girls and 1 son. They get along great. They work real well together. Now their kids are getting older. Well, my kids might want to step into the business. Well, you have 3 families with kids. How do they address that? So the families were concerned about, okay, if I wanted to step out of this business today, because I wanted to retire, how do I ensure under our agreement that my kids are allowed to come into the business, and how my siblings feel about that? So we're now writing agreements, working with attorneys. We actually build a strategy where we uplifted 2 senior executives to take part and help control the company in case one of the owners would pass away, to step in to protect that value or that shift from G1 to G2. So see how complex it gets? It's this new, again, Mike's point, there's no easy answers, but you have to address it. You have to sit down and think about it. But it always comes from the heart. But sometimes it's hard to get through that to make it reality to you. You have to hit it real. And if you don't do this, this is going to happen. It's going to cause a problem and your kids are going to have an issue with it. And we don't want you to do that. We sound like psychiatrists most of the time, but that's what we do. We handhold.
Well, it sounds like a job that's never really done. It's always got moving parts to it.
Yes, it's not something that most other advisors really take the lead on doing, because it is very complicated. We try to be that advisor that is going to take that role with families, but it is an ongoing, constant process that will evolve. The plan will shift. And like that example with that family, there was one set of one plan from generation 1 to, well, I guess it would be generation 2 to generation 3, but now generation 3 to generation 4, because the families just get larger. That's how it works, right? 3 siblings, they each have 2 children. Now you have, all the families and waterfall down and get bigger. That changes how the business is going to be transferred, both from a management standpoint and from an ownership standpoint. It's just the way that it goes. But that's really, again, not a role that most other advisors take, that we like to take with families.
Yeah, we had another case in Oklahoma where we had grandparents were very successful in the oil industry, and they owned a lot of leases and a lot of property in Oklahoma, had a lot of royalty income. And Dad set up a trust for Mom, Grandma and Grandpa. Grandpa set a trust for Mom, says, upon my passing, Mom gets all the income from the wells. And she did all her life, got all the income. Then when she passes away, her 3 children get a third of all that wells. And when they pass away, all the 7 grandkids get distributed all this. How do you manage all that? Who gets what well? Oh boy, did we have to fix that document. You ended up fixing it but again, if you go to G1 to G3, you have to look at the model and say, what happens to all this value? And how do you protect it? And where were the attorneys on this? We to this day, we don't know how they figured this out or didn't figure it out, but we stepped in and fixed it. It was 15 years ago, this case. But to this day, they're watching all this development. Mom's 91, God bless her. Grandma, I mean. And so she's doing well, but it's all gonna happen eventually. And we fixed it. So we feel good about it, but the families feel better because you don't know what you don't know. If we didn't bring that up by reading these documents and saying, here's what's going to happen, and here's the value shift and the risk of that, again, equalization, it's equal to all the 5 grandkids because they all deserve an equal share of the value of whatever the royalties were equally and in a structured way. And that's how you fix it. I know these stories get kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How does life insurance play into this? Because that oftentimes can be a vehicle that some families look to when they're trying to equalize the estate and with the family business being in place. So talk a little bit about maybe some ideas on how that could be utilized.
Yeah, I mean, life insurance, we've talked about in previous podcasts, we think it's an asset class. We don't look at it as being anything other than it's a great tax structure, it's a great leveraging structure, and it creates instant liquidity upon a risk happening, like of someone passing away that needed liquidity to cover either a tax issue or cover a transfer issue of sorts. So this case we were just talking about with the 4 children, when the 2 boys are going to take over the business, assuming that happens, the suggestion we brought to the table a couple of days ago was, why don't we put a life insurance on Dad? So when Dad passes, money flows into the company. That creates that liquidity pool, allows the 2 boys to buy out the girl's stock on a completion. Now the girls get Dad's value that he wants the girls to get. Now the boys get the business and everybody's happy. And they thought that was a wonderful idea. But that's how simple you could resolve this. But you have to take that next step and leverage it the best way you can. And insurance in this particular scenario might be the solution. It's not the problem, it's a solution to the problem that might make sense for the client. Now you have health issues, and he's an older gentleman, so you have those kind of issues, but we haven't even talked to the client about it yet. It's just the advisors working behind the scenes, trying to come up with strategies that we could present to this family to fix what we see is going to be a major problem.
Yeah, that's. I knew that's exactly what you would say.
I knew you.
Because I set you up for that. Right. I mean, I think that is relative. To your point, you do have to. It's life insurance. You have to go through an underwriting process, but that might be an interesting design here as a way to, let's say, if the daughters are not interested in owning the business, life insurance can play a role as a solution to that issue, where all the children are treated equally from a valuation perspective and a dollar value perspective, but maybe the boys end up getting to run the business and actually have the ultimate ownership of that business going forward, and they can sink or swim based on their own abilities to run the business, and that might work out for everybody. So again, these are all different strategies that we've employed with families that they've ultimately implemented to fit whatever plan they want to accomplish.
Now, to get back to the underwriting, this is really where our creativity, from our experience level, we kind of develop. Let's assume we wanted to have that buyout with Dad. He bought and he wanted to apply for insurance, and he was uninsurable, health issues, whatever it might be. There's a strategy we use that allows you to have no underwriting necessary to get life insurance, but you have to have a certain amount of assets to be able to do that with. So there are ways that you can take that risk off the table and create another design that allows you to buy life insurance with no medical underwriting and create a death benefit for that objective, all tax efficient. So again, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but there are solutions from those scenarios that might not work out on a regular basis. There are some creative ways to work around it. And we've done that in the past. That's that CDLI strategy. Yep. It's a custom designed life insurance strategy we utilize. That's a certain structure. There's no medical underwriting. It's a very creative way to look at it.
All right, guys, that is a lot of information and a lot of different scenarios, but that's what you're here for, right?
Mm-hmm.
We try.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So if people do have some questions about their own, personal family, dynamics, how can they get in touch with you, Michael?
You reach us on social media. So we're on LinkedIn, both my father and I, and Copper Beach is on LinkedIn. You can also reach us on our website, www.cbfgllc.com.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks, guys. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to the Truth About Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.
This material is for informational purposes only. Neither Osaic Wealth, Inc. nor its representatives provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Please consult your own tax, legal, or accounting professional before making any decisions. Copper Beach is not affiliated with Osaic Wealth Incorporated. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Additional advisory services offered through Copper Beach Financial Group. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth. These opinions are subject to change at any time without notice. Any comments or postings are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or a recommendation to buy or sell securities or other financial instruments. Readers should conduct their own review and exercise judgment prior to investing. Investments are not guaranteed, involve risk, and may result in a loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Investments are not suitable for all types of investors. Any opinion expressed in this forum is not the opinions of Osaic Wealth Incorporated and have not been reviewed by the firm for completeness or accuracy. Osaic Wealth Incorporated and Copper Beach Financial Group are not affiliated with any other named business entities mentioned.